business and government background. So for today, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to set some house rules. All mics should be muted. You can switch on your cameras if you want to ask a question, and please do use the chat function if you have any questions to ask the team. As I mentioned before, this is our board members of Mpumalanga Green Cluster Agency. And this is our UK Energy team who will be presenting today. And this is the project management team. So now I'll hand over to my colleague Uri, who will be presenting the first module, Energy and Changing Economics. Over to you, Uri.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. So we'll start with just an overview of global energy situation, just so to get some background. So just starting at looking at globally, that between 62% and 68% of final electricity demand originates in the industrial sector and the commercial and public service sector. So this suggests that there's a close relationship between economic activity and electricity consumption. But looking at the past 15 years, electricity demand has almost stagnated in developed economies like Europe, where there was only about 0.4% average annual growth, despite economic activity growing. And what this means is that about 93% of the worldwide net growth in electricity demand from 2005 originated in emerging and developing economies. That's especially looking at the Asian economies and more specifically India and China, but Africa also contributed to that growth. To avoid the increased emissions, we need to focus on decoupling. So the well-being of everyone is basically, the well-being of people are closely linked to economic development. So we need continued economic growth to improve people's lives. Now, unfortunately, this type of growth is coupled, it's also coupled with the environmental factors. So we cannot grow sustainably without decoupling our environmental impact from our economic growth. It is therefore essential that we have to look at ways to grow our economy without the reliance on harmful environmental sources of energy, and also trying to look at how to prevent degradation of the environment, but improve the well-being of people. So that is where renewable energy comes in. On the back of low operating costs and preferential access to many power systems, the share of renewables in the electricity generation mix rose considerably over the last few years, with record high hourly shares of variable renewable energy across the world. So even during the COVID-19 pandemic, renewable energy were the only source of energy that posted a growth in demand. So low carbon electricity generation, or more specifically looking at solar and wind energy, is expected to exceed fossil fuel-based growth this year and also going forward. The share of renewables in capacity expansion continued its upward trend to reach about 72%, looking at the 2020 graph. But globally, renewable electricity capacity is forecast to increase by over 60% between 2020 and 2026, reaching more than 4,800 gigawatts. So that's 4.8 terawatts of capacity added globally. Looking at 2021, solar PV accounted for about 850 gigawatt of capacity globally, and wind energy accounted for almost the same at around 825 gigawatts. There are, however, other renewable energies that got included, and that's about 140 gigawatts into bioenergy and 16 gigawatts of geothermal energy, plus some more experimental and new technologies like marine energy, which was about 500 megawatts. So renewable energy capacity increased by about 250 gigawatts or 9.1% growth in 2021. So the total installed capacity is on track to overtake coal by 2023 and 2024. The key economic drivers behind this global increase have been government policy support, dedicated procurement programs, and continually reducing operating costs of the technology. The renewable energy costs continue to fall, and this graph basically just gives you a snapshot of 2010 and 2019 prices. The two dominating technologies are solar PV and wind energy. So looking at solar PV, in 2010, it was around 5 Rand per kilowatt hour. But by 2019, it reached about 1 Rand per kilowatt hour. And looking at 2022, we're reaching prices below 30 cents per kilowatt hour. So that's a rapid reduction in price. Looking at wind energy, in 2010, it started about 1 Rand 30 per kilowatt hour. And by 2019, it was about 80 cents per kilowatt hour. And we're also seeing prices below 50 cents per kilowatt hour in the last few years. And it's expected that these trends will continue in the future. So these numbers look even better when you look at actual projects globally. So especially in the Middle East, we've seen that some of the prices have gone to, in Rand terms, to around 20 to 25 cents per kilowatt hour. So now just looking at what happened in South African sector, where we stand in South Africa. The current situation in South Africa is that we remain a vertically integrated system. So Eskom is the single state-owned entity that manages both transmission, generation, and distribution at the national level. However, there is an ongoing process to split Eskom into 3 separate entities, which can each focus on their own respective roles. Our generation mix is, we're looking at a capacity of about 53 gigawatts, consisting of 11 coal-fired power stations, 4 gas turbines, 2 pumped storage schemes, 2 hydroelectric plants, a nuclear power plant, and a wind farm, and that's just looking at Eskom. Looking at independent power producers, of which wind and solar is the biggest plants or biggest capacity that's been added, it's about 6.3 gigawatts of capacity. However, we are currently in electricity crisis, and the reason for that is that over the past 10 years, many things have changed. The coal fleets are reaching their retirement age. The average age of our coal power plants is around 37 years old, which means that about 30% of our coal plants are very close to end of life and needs to be decommissioned. We also have our gas turbines, which runs off diesel, that's operating more often than planned, and this is also a very expensive way to generate electricity. We have some downtime on our hydroelectric plants. We have downtime for maintenance on our Koeberg nuclear plant. There's also been significant delays in the rollout of new renewable energy systems through the REAP program. And all of this leads to load shedding. And just looking back at load shedding, it's as you all know, it's not a new phenomenon. So our electricity crisis actually started around 2008 when the demand started to outstrip the production of electricity. This was largely caused by a lack of new installed capacity in the previous years and also a very rapid economic growth preceding that. In the years following 2008, the demand declined somewhat, which reduced the amount of load shedding, but the underlying challenges were not resolved. And because of that, around 2011, the large-scale well, the large-scale REAP program started to help and add some more capacity to our grid. But load shedding became significant in 2014 when my Yuba power plant lost.
Hear me with the Malanga guys that got muted.
Go on.
In 2015, the supply crisis reached stage 3 load shedding for the first time. And to put it into perspective, stage 1 means about a 20 billion rand cost to our economy. Stage 2 is about a 40 billion rand cost to our economy, and stage 3 is an 80 billion rand cost to our economy. So it's a very expensive and costly situation that we find ourselves in. But despite these challenges, there were still delays in bringing new power plants online. So in 2019, 6 generation units went offline, taking us for the first time to level 4 load shedding. But this year, we have seen the longest load shedding on record, and load shedding is expected to continue for the next 3 to 5 years. So we're still in this crisis, and we need to find a way out. And unfortunately, we weren't prepared for this crisis. So looking at this graph, this is what the next 5 years look like under the expected demand and energy availability factor. In other words, how much generation we have available according to the IRP. And to put in perspective what is actually happening, I'm just going to flip back and forward, and you see that what we expected and what's actually happening is completely different, and we're in a much worse situation than we anticipated. And that brings us to what can be done. So internationally, driving a customer response at scale has had a very good impact on alleviating situations like this. And that's driven by small-scale embedded generation, larger scale, well, that's looking at residential, but also larger scale embedded generation, looking at commercial and agriculture, and then looking at the very large scale, which is industrial mining systems. But that alone doesn't solve the problems. It can also be addressed looking at the capacity energy gap via expanding on existing programs such as the REAP, or more specifically the risk mitigation power purchase program, which is a process to ensure that the capacity goes online much quicker, and also continuing to implement the plans that were set out in the IRP 2019 as an immediate focus to ensure sufficient lead time for procurement processes and technology-specific and then also a scenario without renewable energy build limits provide at least cost options for by 2030. But then the status post 2030 is looking at decommissioning of coal of about 28 gigawatts. So that is almost half our current fleet. And then also looking at the emission constraints that's placed on, well, that we're placing on ourselves and that's placed on us internationally. Which implies that coal will become a minor contributor looking at the far future of 2040 or 2050. And then hopefully looking at no annual renewable energy build limits and strict strategy to reduce greenhouse gases And all of this means that we are moving away from coal as our main energy source.
My colleague Arvin will be presenting now on emerging energy opportunities. Over to you, Arvin.
Thank you for that, Sam. So we'll now be going into some of the opportunities that are now presenting themselves to Mpumalanga as a province and to many of your municipalities. I'll specifically be going through some of the renewable energy opportunities, and then after that, we'll go into storage, electric vehicles. So starting with renewable energy. So as Ulrich mentioned, the RRP is the basis for the Renewable Energy Independent Power Procurement Program, which is the national auction bidding program in which private companies bid to build these large renewable energy plants. Some things to note about that program is that the different bids are evaluated on specific criteria. There's an economic development component, as well as a local content component. So those are the main mechanisms with which we can see those program or that procurement driving localization and industrialization through the renewable energy sector. As you would have seen in the RRP, there are allocations for certain technologies like solar and wind. So that's the main way in which power is procured in terms of large renewable energy plants. The effect that this has had on the market is in the initial bid rounds, the cost of procuring solar and wind was relatively high, but as the bids have gone on, the technologies have become a lot more cost competitive. A lot of players have become more established in delivering these projects, and now in the most recent bid rounds, we found that that they're quite cost competitive with new coal. Other factors to consider when we look at drivers for the renewable energy opportunities has been the rising electricity tariffs. So all linked to what Ulrich mentioned in terms of the status and what is happening in Eskom. We have seen significant increases in tariffs all the way back from 2010. From 2017, we've seen a 40% increase in tariffs. And as many of you would know, this is then knocked on to the municipalities that have to include those increases on top of their own increase. So this has an impact on constituents. So the procurement of renewable energy and inclusion of renewable energy as a source is one means in which we can procure electricity at a potentially cheaper price compared to Eskom tariffs. Okay, then looking at maybe a bit more of a deeper dive in terms of public offtake versus the private offtake. So as I mentioned, there have been 5 bid windows that have already gone through their bidding process. Round 6 has currently also received bids. Close to 200 billion rand in investment has been attracted into the sector, including 20% of that being international investment, and 6.4 gigawatts of energy has been procured in terms of renewable energy. South Africa has a strong just transition focus, which is very relevant to Mpumalanga, and many municipalities are now also looking to procure their own power generation projects. So there was a regulatory movement which allowed municipalities to procure from IPPs, which could unlock up to 260 megawatts of new demand in the province. There's also a long-term plan by Eskom to repurpose and repower coal plants, which is anticipated to take effect in the long term, looking at up to 10 years and above. So very important in terms of the just transition context. Some of the barriers to consider, some of these, so for example, the REAP bid rounds not being as consistent. So we're looking at these being a lot more consistent now. So there was a brief gap which affected investor confidence. But what we're seeing as indications, given the energy insecurity situation in South Africa, is that with bid window 6 and bid window 5 and bid window 6, that hopefully that they're going to be more consistent now, and that will be a basis to drive more or investment across the value chain, including into local content and manufacturing. Wind and solar resources being less competitive. So what we're seeing here is that most of the grid, in terms of new capacity and availability to take on new capacity, is constrained in other areas, such as the Northern Cape, that would be more competitive in terms of the solar irradiation resource and the wind resource. But what this means is that Mpumalanga, as time goes on, becomes increasingly attractive because there is still grid capacity in Mpumalanga, which creates an opportunity. So a lot of these barriers can be seen as becoming opportunities in the future, especially for Mpumalanga. There's also a need for developers to have a better access to information on minerals and mining rights, which is some of the work that is now being done in the sector. And a lot of the municipalities are still developing their procurement processes and undergoing understanding their own sort of internal IRPs that they're using to guide their tenders. But many municipalities are now releasing tenders, and there's potentially a vision for municipalities in Mpumalanga to follow in that same direction. Yeah, so those are the main barriers in terms of public opportunities and barriers in terms of public offtake. When we look at small scale embedded generation, so nationally, we would define this as generation less than 1 megawatt. In terms of embedded generation, that is more of an arbitrary number now. The regulatory movement has seen a removal of the generating license threshold, which means that we will see a lot more embedded generation projects beyond this 1 megawatt, which was previously a limitation, because most projects will still be, in terms of will still be rooftop projects. There will be a limitation in terms of roof space, but in Mpumalanga we see a lot more ground-mounted systems as well. So definitely you can see some large projects in Mpumalanga. Currently, the installed capacity nationally is around 2.3 gigawatt peak. Since the change in the regulation, we're seeing an accelerated growth in this market. So it's growing around 500 to 750 megawatt peak per year. And we could expect it to reach 7.5 gigawatts by 2035, which in the context of the overall generation in South Africa starts to become very, very relevant. As I said, dominated mostly by rooftop PV, but maybe a little bit different in Mpumalanga, definitely a lot more scope for ground mount. And currently a lot of the equipment that is used in the sector is still imported, but we're hoping that off the back of the REAP projects, we start to see a lot more local manufacturing and potentially that tapping into this the demand from this sector as well. Looking at small scale wind, so small scale wind, important to mention what has happened and what is the potential there, because when we talk about embedded generation, often the immediate deferral is to solar PV. So there's maybe only a handful of companies offering this sort of equipment into the South African market, including Windstrom and Viking Group. These are mostly small turbines, so looking at your around 60 kilowatt range size. There's also Kestrel Wind, which is one of the local market leaders. They're mostly producing for export to other countries because the demand in South Africa is relatively low. The main reasons for that is because on a kilowatt peak basis, small scale wind is a lot more expensive, and also not as easy to implement when you're comparing it to solar PV. These are some of what you may have already seen or may see in the future. So these are different types of solar systems. Starting from left to right, you have your rooftop PV, then you have your ground mount PV. In the bottom there, you have carports. So solar PV installed on the sort of top of shading of carports. And then what we often see now in the agriculture sector and wastewater sector and wastewater treatment plants is floating solar as well. So floating solar has the added benefit of providing a buffer against evaporation on those bodies of water. So some dual benefits there for those sectors. So as I mentioned, solar PV is quite competitive. If you compare this to what we saw on the small scale wind, you're looking at around up to 3 times cheaper. This is what we've seen based on our primary research with the market, speaking to developers in terms of what they're offering. What you'll notice is there's an economy of scale happening here. So as the size of the PV system gets larger, you're able to access a cheaper price per kilowatt peak capacity. There's also a number of different procurement options available. So there's sort of 2 categories. Either you finance it on your own balance sheet, so you pay for the system, or you procure it through debt, so through getting a loan from a commercial debt provider. The other ways are to procure on a more operating basis. So the service provider will maintain ownership of the system, maintain the risk and responsibility of ensuring the performance of the system, and then you pay a power purchase you pay a rate per kilowatt hour of units of energy generated and used on a power purchase agreement. Sort of midway between the 2 options is a lease to own, where you pay a rate per month with often the opportunity to potentially buy off the system later. And looking at how this then compares to the cost of energy that you would be on an Eskom or a grid sort of normal grid tariff, you're looking at around 40 to 60% reduction based on what you can get on the power purchase agreement rate from solar PV. So this is where you start to see a significant saving and reduction in sort of energy cost. Looking at the private offtake, so this is mostly for your commercial, industrial, and agricultural sectors. We're looking at seeing this market growing in Mpumalanga by around 40 megawatts per year in the next 10 years. We would say that this is an immediate opportunity. So you may already have noticed plants going up in your municipalities. Because the business case is so good, you're likely to see this continue. The ground-mounted PV market is expected to grow by around 100 megawatts per year for the next 1 to 5 years. And a big barrier, but also potentially framing it as an opportunity, is seeing municipalities put in some more work into developing their embedded generation policy to facilitate this investment and economic activity coming into their jurisdictions. Lastly, just an overview of what has been happening nationally. So we've been seeing an increased or progress in terms of embedded generation policies across the country. So a lot of the work we did started in the Western Cape, but now we're seeing a lot more progress in other municipalities, and a lot of our team is also doing work with some of the municipalities in Mpumalanga to develop these policies and to develop tariffs. So that's sort of the overview in terms of the renewable energy opportunities. Sam is now going to explain a little exercise we want to do just to get you thinking around what we've presented so far.
Thank you, Argan. I will be, just give me a second. So the exercise will involve something called ideas boards. I will send you, I'll copy the link in the chat, or add the link in the chat, sorry. Tula, can you just take into exercise 1? So Tula will add the link in the chat. Please copy and paste the link into your browser, and then it will appear on your side. Okay. Move over to exercise 1. Okay, I'll explain how ideas boards, how it's working, and then Alvin will take you through the exercise. So for question 1, as you can see, the next to question 1, there's a green circle with a little cross. You can click on there. Tonight I can show them an example. You can click on there. A sticky note will appear. Then you can tap your answer in the sticky note, and then it will stay on there. Alvin, do you just want to show 1 question per time, or are you going to keep it like this?
We can keep it like this.
Okay,
yeah.
Cool. So does anyone have any questions?
Sorry, yes, I do have a question.
Yes, you go for it.
Yes, on the chat, like I don't have I cannot access the chat. Like it's the chat.
That's the function.
The chat is only available for team members, so I cannot access the chat where you said you sent the link.
Okay.
Oh, shucks.
Sorry for that. So we will be showing it on our side, and if you do have a answer to the question, then we can just type it in from our end. Sorry for that.
Oh, all right.
Sorry, we're just trying to figure out something quickly regarding the chat so that everyone can have access. Shouldn't we save it?
Can you check on your
maybe
side?
if we go to chat.
Please save and then I'll go.
Now the chat, accessing the chat is a functionality from their side.
I think so.
We don't have control over it. We can see the chat.
And I also can't see anything.
I'll send it on Q&A.
Okay, so we found an alternative. We'll send the link on Q&A. And then please just let us know if you are able to access the link.
Do you see it on your end?
I don't. I see the ideas boards thing, but I don't see.
Okay.
Okay, so we're just gonna adapt to that. So it's gonna challenge you to be a bit more interactive in the session. But looking at the first question, what is the current status of your municipality's engagement with renewable energy and energy efficiency? So this is just to get you thinking. You know, what are you currently seeing in your municipality in terms of renewable energy and energy efficiency? Are you still on mute?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Okay, sorry, that's just going to challenge us to be a bit more engaging and interactive. But looking at the first question, what is the current status of your municipality's engagement with RE and EE? So this is just to get you thinking about what have you currently seen in your municipality? Are you seeing projects in your municipality? So we would love to hear some contributions in terms of your initial thoughts on renewable energy, but also energy efficiency in your municipality.
It will just happen.
So we're gonna have to require you to unmute to contribute. Unfortunately, we don't have the typing function at the moment. I'm taking silence as meaning there's no renewable energy or energy efficiency in your municipalities.
Yeah, hello?
Hi,
Yes,
Jacob.
we can hear you.
Yeah, it's Jacob from Victor Kanye local municipality. The first question, what is the current status of your municipality engagement with the RE and the EE? I think we were installing solar lights, trying to outphase the original lights which are electrified by electricity. We are trying to move to solar lights, and I think as we're getting to these workshops, we'll try to improve more, especially when we read the templates. We find out that we can be able to install solar on our wastewater treatment plants and the other buildings. So we'll be moving towards that. But currently what is happening is just the outphasing of the old system of lights with the solar lights. Thank you.
And is that public lighting or is it lighting in your buildings? Is it, so it's not LED lights? Is it solar public lighting? Street lights?
Yeah, yes, it's solar public lighting, not in offices.
Okay. Thanks for that, Jacob. Anyone else?
Yes, I am. It's Lebogang from EDM, Ehlanzeni District Municipality.
Hi, Lebogang. Yeah, we can
Yes.
hear you.
Yeah, I would also like to add that at our municipality, I think maybe the scale of implementing the renewable energy is not that high. But recently we've started installing solar panels on whenever we install, say, boreholes, right? So the pumps, we power them using the solar panels. But reason being is because most of the places you find that they remote, the access to maybe an ESCOM connection could be far. So we resort to using solar panels for the boreholes.
Interesting.
I think she just got many people. Oh, Molly raised the hand. Yes, Molly, you can go ahead.
Greetings to the house or to the team. Basically, as Chief Advocate Tule, we have started, but basically, we have started to, about 150, we have installed about 150 solar to the residents where they were far from the grid due to some issues that we had with extending like our lines to or distribution lines to them. But we experienced some complaints to say it was mainly for lights and the TV. It couldn't do much, for the houses and all that. They had started like last financial year. Yes, so basically we have started with 150 solar panels just for the lighting system and for the TV. I thank you.
I'm going to take one more. And then
Yeah, maybe one more contribution on this question. Check in the room if there's anyone.
just looking in.
Question 2.
Okay, yeah, so okay, so next question. Hello.
Greeting colleagues.
Jennifer.
Hello.
Hello, I
Hi.
can hear you.
My name is Tabo
Hi, Tabo.
from Ehlanzeni district. We did try to put the floodlights, the solar floodlights there at Tabashwe.
Okay.
Yes, there was a complaint that the light that gives out is not enough because there are a lot of shadows on the radius of that floodlight of a mast. So I think it was needed to be improved because the lights there on top, they were almost 9 of them. We don't know whether maybe it's being affected by the length of the structure. Maybe the supply or that light which gives out the shining was not enough. So that's where maybe we're trying to cancel them and go on with the ones with and maintain the ones which are presently supplied by the electricity. That's all.
Thanks, Tabo.
Thank you, Tabo. Molly, do you have a question?
No contribution.
It's not a question per se, it's just the corrections to say it's not 250, ne? It's 150.
Okay, thank you, Molly.
150, yes, and on the complaints there, the residents of that area, they were complaining to say the solar is not good enough. It's not sufficient for the other household things, you understand, so that we can capture it correctly. So even if we have to upgrade from whatever that is there for household, at least if we can add that they can plug other stuff like a stove, a two plate, something like that. So I want us to start from the baseline of what is there and how can we improve it. Thank you.
So yeah, like a common theme coming out of this first question is most of what we're seeing is through municipal-led projects, but based on service provision and more energy access related. Looking at the second question now, what do you think the effect of increasing renewable energy will have on your municipality? So, for example, what do you think you would need to see more private businesses installing solar PV in your municipality? Start to see almost less of an energy access focus on terms of increasing renewable energy, but more of a reducing the cost of your energy, energy resilience, business resilience. What do you think could be done, or what do you think could be the effect of increasing renewable energy on your municipality? Yes, Jacob.
Thank you. As in Victor Kanye, we experienced that there's a company, McCain, which has planted its own solar panels. Now they want to move off the grid of the municipality. And the biggest challenge is that when that company moves, obviously the revenue which was brought by that company will have a huge impact, because the municipality is holding on that revenue to do other services, like your payment of wages and stuff. So as soon as McCain is pulling out, that means the municipality will suffer in terms of revenue collection. I think that's the biggest challenge we have, because the matter, it even went as far as to the parliament, where McCain is trying to enforce that the municipality allows it to generate its own power through those solar panels. I think that's the biggest challenge from my side.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. I mean, it would be great to hear a bit more from the other participants. So the effect of increasing renewable energy, do you see it as being a positive effect? Do you see it as being a negative effect? If negative, why? If positive, why? Yeah, we would love to hear your perspectives based on your current feeling and understanding of renewable energy.
Should we move on?
I'm gonna nominate someone.
Yeah, maybe some of our previous contributors.
Should we,
Or someone who hasn't contributed yet.
oh, someone raised their hand. Should we say?
Colette?
Colette?
Morning, everyone. I
Morning.
think to add to what Jacob was saying regarding McCain, I'm from Mega, so I do have a bit of some information there as well. When McCain approached the department, the issue was the concern around the load shedding, that it was causing quite a big loss to their production. So in terms of that, putting in the solar panels on their plant, they were also concerned about the fact of job losses. That if there is no production and at McCain, they would have to end up looking at cutting down on the number of people that were there, or even moving their operation. So where you're mentioning the issue of whether it be a positive or a negative, it's a double-edged sword, because you might be now putting in solar panels, but at the same time you are still keeping people employed. So there is another thing that another side to it that you can look at it. There's quite a lot of people working at McCain.
Yeah, no, definitely. Thanks for that contribution, Colette. So helps us to start to think about the sort of complexity of the situation. How do municipalities restructure their revenue model to support the implementation of solar for businesses who, like McCain, who at this point can't afford not to look at some kind of energy resilience measure like solar with batteries or solar. So thanks for that contribution, Kelly.
Sorry, Argan. Lebukang, you raised your hand earlier on. Would you like to contribute to the conversation?
Oh yes, I just wanted to add on. I think the effect of the increase will be both positive, and at some points I don't know if to call it negative, but challenging, because now you're talking about a municipality that has been running on electricity and diesel for so many years. So now obviously when the renewable energy comes in, now even the maintenance plans have to change, and then it also comes back to the jobs for the people who kept on the maintenance. Now all of that now needs to change, but obviously in the long run, cost-wise and efficient in terms of efficiency, it is gonna have a positive impact in our municipality. But then I think it's only the road to get there that's only gonna be challenging, because now you have an infrastructure that is built on support of electricity. So now the change from that electricity to, say, maybe solar, it's going to have an impact in terms of probably having to decommission some of the old infrastructure that was in place. So, but I believe that the effect is in the long run going to be positive for the municipality.
Sure. Yeah, so I think it's very related to this next question. I think we've started to touch on this question already. So what in your view is currently the biggest opportunity and barrier regarding RE and EE? And from what we've already heard, biggest opportunity, we've looked at business resilience, retention of jobs within the province, potential barriers, looking at existing skills, existing jobs, transitioning between those two. We've looked at impact on municipal revenue, and how the municipality is going to transition in that sense. If there's anything anyone else would like to add in terms of what they see as potentially the big opportunity here, or big barrier that they maybe keeps them up at night when they think about it.
Good morning, everybody. If I can just give a bit of a comment.
Who is that?
Right, my name is Atibota from a company called Kutula Energy. We are utility scale independent power producers. The problem that arose is basically the fact that Eskom cannot supply electricity. We also have a problem in the tender procedures to supply Eskom with electricity, in my opinion, is flawed because they need approximately 30 gigawatt of energy to restore Eskom to its normal capacity, and the tender procedures in all the bid round goes to between 2 and 5 gigawatt, and with all the delays, this problem is going to stay with us for the next 10 years. The problem that the municipality is sitting with is that they are getting their power from Eskom, and with Eskom not being able to supply the power, the municipalities have got the option to go out on tender themselves to get their own renewable energy generation, which they can then distribute to the various companies. Virtually all the companies that we are talking to at the moment is sitting with serious problems. If you look at your mining sector, you look at your agricultural sector, you look at people like what you're just telling us about McCain, those people without power is without the business. If you're without the business, you close the business, you lose all your employees, etc., etc., etc. If all your businesses start doing their own electricity, then you've got a problem at the municipality, that the municipality's revenue stream dries up. So the best model for the municipality to follow is the embedded generation system, whereby they either get electricity wheeled to them via a tender, or they bring out the tender themselves to say, we've got land available, you know, you must tender on this land. Although wheeled electricity might probably be the best answer, one will have to look at the problem specifically where the municipalities are to see how well renewable energy can work in a generation model close to the municipalities. And that is basically the answer to all of this, and as well as the opportunity. You know, the municipalities will have to start looking at generating their own electricity via IPPs, and the factories, if you and the businesses, if they do not have another option, they will have to put in the renewable energy systems themselves. Otherwise, they're going to sit without power, which they can't have. Otherwise, they close the business down. So, in short, that is my contribution. Thank you.
Thanks for that. I think that was a good summary of the landscape, linking the national context to the municipal context. Okay, Jacob.
Thank you again. I think I'm partially covered by the latter speaker because he touched on what I wanted to touch, especially the question was to say, if the municipalities now have authority to generate their own renewable energy, then it will have a positive impact, because if I'm looking at our municipality, we have a vast land whereby we can be able to install our own solar energy there and be able to distribute to the community, if that is possible, because that was the other part which I was not sure of. But if it's possible, I think it's an opportunity for the municipality to reduce their debts from Eskom so that they can be able to produce electricity and generate electricity and then distribute to the community. That will be have a good impact. And again, on installing of solar panels on rooftops of our buildings, and as the latter speakers from the other questions have said it, if we move from boreholes which are supplied by electricity and we use solar ones, that will have at least, we will reduce the intake which we are taking from Eskom. So yes, it's got good opportunities if you look it in the future. But if the municipality will be able to generate electricity, it's super. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for the contributions, everyone. I think we're ready to move on to our next session. Sorry?
We're going on a break.
Oh, okay. We're going to take a short break.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the exercise session, Arvin, and to the participants who participated as well. We'll be going on a 5-minute break now, so you can stretch your legs a bit, grab a glass of water or coffee, and then I'll ask Tula to add a link. Oh, no. After the workshop, I'll email you a link to the questionnaire you just have to fill out after the workshop. So we'll be on a break now. Thank you.
So yeah, just stand up, get a coffee, and come back.
And come back. Please don't log off or join any other meeting. Thank you. 5-minute break.
Yeah.
Sorry for that. We're just uploading the next presentation, which my colleague Machaka Ketsi will present on. And then once the presentation is ready, then she'll start. Thank you. Thanks for your patience.
I want to mute your speaker. Oh.
Thank you. We will be starting the following session now, Module 4, which is electricity and wheeling. And as I mentioned before, Machaka Ketsi will be presenting that. Over to you, Machaka.
Right, thank you so much, Sam. I hope everyone is refreshed, is able to stretch up, and we are good to go for the second round. So I'm going to do a presentation on electricity and wheeling. So we have listened to the presentations by Arkin and Ulrich, and they've provided this amazing insights into the global trends of electricity and also the local ones as well. And also there's some great insights regarding the emerging opportunities within the renewable energy space. So further expanding on some of the opportunities that exist, one of the fascinating trends gaining momentum is power wheeling. So what this presentation is going to do is explore the wheeling framework, what it is, how it works, the regulatory and technical requirements, and also outlining the benefits for stakeholders and a quick run through the different charges and the tariff structures. So what is wheeling? Wheeling basically, wheeling basically describes a process whereby power is produced in one location by a generator, also thought of as a third-party supplier, and transported over the distribution network to a customer's point of supply. And basically that power is wheeled to serve the customer's self-consumption requirements. This framework is thought more of as a financial transaction between the generator, the utility, also the retailer, and the off-taker customer. It's a transaction that captures the transportation cost between these two parties. So to have a more pictorial view of what wheeling is and what it looks like, yes, we have the three different types of parties that are involved within the wheeling framework. We first have the customer. A customer could be a large power user that would opt for a remote generator that has the ability to offset their bill. For example, we have the AWS data center, this which is located in the Northwest Province and is receiving wheeled power from the solar farm in the Northern Cape. And then we have examples such as mines. An example is Tronox that has also opted for a wheeling agreement that wheels power to their facilities. And so when we look at the municipalities, there are quite a few municipalities that are already engaged in this space. To give an example of some, we have George Municipality, we have City Power, and then more locally in Mpumalanga, we have Bombela Municipality, as well as Nelson Mandela Bay Municipality. So when we're looking at the renewable energy sector, with an increasing appetite of installing this remote renewable energy technologies or plants, we have the Solar Group that has a wheeling agreement with Amazon Web Services data centers and the products markets. So, what are the growing trends that are driving an increased participation in wheeling, or in effect creating increased wheeling opportunities? First, we have the increasing threshold of the 100 megawatts. Not only is there an opportunity for an increased renewable energy penetration, but a large-scale own generation market entry opportunities for customers that are placed within the municipal network. Second, we're seeing a trend in increasing electricity prices. I think in the previous conversations, Argon was really elaborated on how this looks. And also, in parallel to this, we have the reduction in energy technology prices, making it an additional incentives for purchase of cleaner technologies and more cost-effective energy prices. And finally, when considering stakeholders such as the municipality, they are able to promote an increased uptake of renewables within their distribution network, creating an increasing appetite for private generators to actually participate within the space and actually have your large power customers that are ready to offtake that energy. So, what does this wheeling framework look like? So basically what this picture is a block diagram that illustrates the working mechanisms of the wheeling framework. The generator, the municipal network, or which we'll think about as the municipality and the customer, as well as Eskom, the different parties that would typically be involved during this process. So starting first with the generator, or also thought of as the third party supplier, they would have a power purchase agreement with the customer. This power purchase agreement is independent of the municipality, and it's just a contractual agreement, or what is also thought of as a bilateral agreement between the generator and the customer. Now, when you look at the relationship between the generator and the municipal network, the generator would need to engage and would need to have a use of systems agreement. And some of the things that are incorporated within the use of systems agreement is the use of system charge and the connection charges. And these would need to be communicated or agreed upon between the generator and the municipality. They essentially describe the charges that are incurred by the generator for wheeling power over the distribution network. And also adding to this, the generator would need to adhere to technical and regulatory specifications and guidelines, including having a license and having registered with NERSA. So within this transaction, looking at the relationship between the municipality and the customer, the municipality then passes the wheeling charges to the customer via what is called the wheeling tariff. And the aim of it is to remain surplus neutral. The value of the surplus neutrality is that the municipality does not incur additional cost for allowing that power or facilitating that power to be wheeled within their network. And so their revenue is not impacted, and the private generators are then incentivized to have more customers within the municipal network to actually feed to. And so the wheeling rules and regulations, now that we've touched on the different roles of the different parties that are included within this financial transactions. We are going to just briefly highlight the NESA rules on the network charges of third-party transportation of energy, and basically just stating them as they are, that any load customer shall be free to go into bilateral agreements with any third-party generator that is a non-municipal or a non-ESCOM generator. And looking at section 12.1, we have it basically says that the fueling of energy shall be allowed subject to the generator receiving its approvals from NERSA to sell a third party and signing the network service provider connection and the use of systems agreement. So with 6.7 and 12.1, the generator and the municipal network would have the systems generation, the use of systems charge, and the customer is this bylaw basically enables the principles to ensure non-discriminatory access to the customer within the municipal grid. So there are multiple conversations that are happening regarding the Electricity Regulation Act. And so the ERA wording in effect has enabled wheeling, which as mentioned before, ensures the principle of non-discriminatory grid access by licensed distributors to third parties. All customers within the transmission or distribution network are provided with this non-discriminatory grid access. The cumulative effect of these sections make it clear that licensed distributors should not refuse grid access to small-scale generators except for some technical exceptions. And also a bylaw would be needed by the municipality to allow for retail or wheeling of the electricity through the municipal network by a third-party licensed electricity supplier to a customer that is located within the municipal supply area. So, when we think about wheeling, there are different scenarios that we can think about. So these scenarios basically describe the topologies that would be used by the generator and the customer. The first one is one-to-one type of topology, where you have a generator that is located in one area feeding to one customer that is located within the municipal distribution network. The other configuration we have, it's a one-to-many. And this is a scenario where you still have the one generator, but then feeding to multiple customers that are based within the municipal network. So I think the one-to-one, just a quick comment on that, it's an arrangement that we're seeing more of, and not a lot of municipalities have adopted the one-to-many sort of approach. So the many-to-one, it's where it's a configuration whereby you have multiple generators and one customer. So one of the benefits of this is that for the customer, you have this healthy energy mix. If you're building power from renewable energy sources, you have solar in the daylight, and then you would have potential other generation sources in the nighttime. So you have this continuous energy supply, which promotes service continuity. Another advantage to this is that the large power user may require additional capacity that would have not been able to be provided by one generator, and so having this mix would actually support that. And then we have another configuration of many-to-one. The advantage, just as the many-to-many, sorry about that. So the advantage, similar to the many-to-one, is that you have this this energy mix of the different resources, and now feeding to multiple customers within the municipality grid. So, what are the benefits of wheeling? And we'll first think about the benefits to the customer. So the customer has the opportunity, or is now granted the opportunity, to actually purchase clean, cost-effective energy whilst reducing their CO2 emissions. Making reference again to the ERA non-discriminatory grid access, we have a fair grid access to the off-taker, and other opportunities include the opportunity for the customer to reduce consumptions of intensive power power equipment or equipment that need that have high power requirements, yes, and also processes that would also have high power requirements. And another opportunity is that for customers, they don't necessarily have to build solar, they don't necessarily have to have on-premises solar generation, but then can opt for a solution where they can have power wheeled from them from a different location. Another opportunity that still expands on the space constraints is that you have the customer now maximizing the amount of space that they can use on their premise, and with the generator located in a different location, we do not have to confront such conversations. And another beautiful advantage is also avoiding capital costs, which would be incurred in actually having their own generation technology. So on the municipal side, what's interesting is there's an opportunity for sustainable wires business. And also it's an opportunity for the municipality to participate within the renewable energy space. The other opportunities include additional capacity to the distribution network and also reducing demand requirements. Now, another added benefit from them is the opportunity for them to encourage increased renewable energy penetration without incurring the cost of having the on-site generation, and also participating in this sphere in a quite cost-effective manner. When we're looking at the renewable energy sector, this enabling environment that will be created by the municipality would increase the appetite for more private generators to actually opt to have more of them installed. And we are also seeing this cumulative trend whereby more and more power generators actually are interested or are eager to enter the space because they're seeing these growing opportunities. So the wheeling puzzle has 4 key pieces, and these are the regulation, the technical, the institutional, and the financial. So the regulation, it's the very simple questions. Are the installations legal? Making reference to the NERSA guidelines that we covered in the earlier slides and the ERA, non-discriminatory grid access, and also understanding it from a regulatory and legislative perspective. It is important to know whether the installations are indeed legal. And then one of the requirements, as we did mention, it's the bylaws that are required to ensure that this regulation is met. The technical piece, it's more safety mechanisms that speaks to the Renewable Energy Grid Code compliance and also the NRS 097 standard. And so what we need to understand now with the first 2 pieces is that technically they are already solved. So it's up to the municipality to sort of capacitate these installations. So with the institutional and the financial pieces, that's sort of where our work is focused on and the type of support that we actually provide to municipalities. So when we look at the institutional piece, it's what processes should the municipalities follow to allow for this transaction between the private generator and the customer that is located within their network. And so the financial is now describing what this transaction looks, what this charge looks like. What is the wheeling tariff that needs to be designed to capture all the costs that are incurred by the municipality in facilitating this energy transport. So focusing a bit more on the financial side and unbundling what the wheeling tariff looks like. There are charges to customers. So these charges are charges that are typically, these are typical charges to the customers, whether they have wheeling or they do not have wheeling. And so it's charges a customer would incur in lieu of being over the distribution network of the municipality. So these charges, what they would reflect, they're bundled together. So when we unbundle them, you have the energy charge, you have the energy charge that's charged at cents per kilowatt hour, you have the service charge that's charged at rent per month, and then you have the excess charge, which can further be divided into the capacity and demand charges. So further unbundling the energy charge, because that's where the feed-in tariff is captured and also derived. And we have, yes, so the energy charge to the customer comes as the bulk energy, and the additional charges that would be incurred by the municipality in facilitating this transport, and also this additional charges would be adjusted for losses. So this additional contribution, these additional charges include the surcharge, the subsidy, and the network charge. And so this network charge at times is also, from the customer's perspective, is referred to as the use of system charge as well. And so basically what I'm now going to do is just have a very quick example of what the figures look like and what it means for the municipalities, and sort of take it from there. So looking at the municipal tariff structure. So the first thing that we're going to be addressing is why it's called surplus neutral, or why the wheeling tariff is indeed surplus neutral. So you have the ESCOM tariff, and then you have the utility tariff, also the municipality tariff. That has already been adjusted for losses, providing a difference, which is then referred to as the wheeling charge. So the charge to the customer, essentially that has wheeling enabled on their network, would be the wheeling tariff plus the mega flex low season tariff, which by the figures would be about 0.45. So it is, the municipality isn't incurring any losses, and the tariff essentially remains the tariff basically remains surplus neutral. And so taking one example for instance, the ESCOM charge, which is the 0.39 cents, it's the charge that's charged to the municipality, and the municipality adds, which is the mega flex low season charge, and then the municipality then charges the customer the energy charges, which as described encompasses the ESCOM charge and the additional charges, as well as the adjustment of the losses. And the difference between those two provide what is called the wheeling tariff. And so this wheeling tariff, it's basically going to be reflected on for the customer. So yes, this is the last slide that I have. This next row, it's the questions.
No, we lost. Thank you for presenting, Machata. We will be now moving on to electric vehicles that will be presented by Priyan. We're just going to share that presentation, and then we can start with Priyan's presentation.
You have to take off.
Yes.
Is that the presentation?
We don't see it in presentation here. You can use that same one actually, but just make sure that you can still get people in.
Oh, this is going to take a while. Yes, please.
Yeah, it's nice.
Like this one.
No.
Because when I see the slide,
Wait.
it's the same one that you said.
Yes. I see you can use that, but you must just share it so that you can send people in.
And this. Wait, guys.
You can use that same one you use now, but just leave it. See. You can see. Over to you, Frank.
Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's presentation on electric vehicles. Just going to give you a brief market overview of the electric vehicle industry in South Africa and how it's applicable to Mpumalanga in particular. So, as you know, the automotive assembly and manufacturing market is a huge contributor to the South African economy. We produce more vehicles for export currently than what we consume. And so it's a major source of external revenue for the country. In terms of policy, that's been changing in our export markets in Europe and in North America. We would have heard that these countries have banned the sale of internal combustion engine vehicles by 2035. And so there's a major concern that in the years to come, South Africa is not going to have an export market for our internal combustion engine vehicles that we mostly produce. And so there's a push to sort of see how we can help the South African automotive industry to transition, start manufacturing electric vehicles locally. So that's the one push in terms of an export market. And the second push in terms of supplying EVs for the local market. So currently, most EVs are imported, so we don't manufacture them locally. And because we don't have any specific government subsidies for the purchase, for the consumer purchase of electric vehicles, as well as the import duty of 25% that's applied to EVs, as compared to the 18% on ICE vehicle imports, as well as a luxury goods tax that's applied to the importation of EVs. And because most of EVs are in the price range of 600,000 Rand and above, together there's about 42% in customs duties and ad valorem taxes that's applied to consumers that wish to import an electric vehicle into South Africa. That makes it very expensive for most consumers to purchase the EV, even if they want to save on fuel costs. And so one of the mechanisms of getting around that sort of barrier on price is to encourage the local manufacturing of EVs to somehow bring down that cost. I think the cheapest is an electric Mini Cooper on the South African market right now at around 800,000 Rand. And so pushing to create incentives and opportunities for local manufacturing of EVs to increase accessibility. The other point that I also wanted to make is that there's also been a trend of electric vehicle retrofitting that's been happening in South Africa, and in particular, something to highlight in Mpumalanga, Electric Powered Vehicles Africa is doing incredible work in terms of leading the national conversation around EV retrofitting. So they started with the conversion of electric game viewing vehicles for safari tours and private game farms. They've now expanded to electric last mile delivery vehicles for Spa in Mpumalanga as a specific case study, but the influence has gone beyond the Mpumalanga province, and they're starting franchises in Gauteng and the Western Cape as well. So really great news to see in the EV sector coming out of Mpumalanga. Yeah, go to the next slide. So when looking at the total market size for EVs in South Africa, we base it in terms of what is the existing internal combustion engine vehicle market in South Africa. So as we know, the largest sort of segment is the private passenger vehicle market at 7.6 million vehicles. And then the second largest sector is the light delivery vehicle market at 2.7 million vehicles. Also significant opportunities in public transport with around 350,000 minibus taxis and around 65,000 buses and minibuses in the South African market. In terms of the heavy duty freight and logistics market, we have around 390,000 heavy duty trucks in South Africa. So that's the total addressable market if we're looking at the electric vehicle transition in South Africa. If we do a deep dive into some statistics on what are the private passenger vehicle electric vehicle sales in South Africa from 2016 to 2021, you'll see that the actual private passenger vehicle uptake in South Africa has been quite low over the past few years. In 2021, 218 electric private passenger vehicles were sold. And I think the 2022 stats is that by June of this year, 205 electric private passenger vehicles have been sold. So the projections are that we're likely to exceed last year's sales. Just looking at a quick breakdown of electric vehicle sales, this is private passenger vehicles in 2021 by OEM brand, just to see what are the sort of common OEMs that have been selling. The Mini Cooper is quite high at 68. That is one of the cheapest in terms of a market entry vehicle for EVs in South Africa. BMW also has good showing with the iX and i3 model, Porsche, Jaguar, and Audi e-tron. We would have seen that earlier this year, Audi had released 6 new electric vehicle models into the South African market for 2022, and they are scheduled to release a few more in 2023 as well. So they're really pushing to increase their market penetration. So why does South Africa or Mpumalanga in particular need an EV manufacturing strategy? So as we know, Mpumalanga has become in recent years the heart of the just energy transition. And while a lot of the focus in terms of the debate and funding been following COP27 recently, has been around how do we transition Eskom away from coal-powered energy to renewables. I think that with the attention on the Mpumalanga market, there really is an opportunity to showcase the electric vehicle transition, or what could happen with the electric vehicle transition in Mpumalanga as a showcase for the rest of the country. One of the key reasons as well is that the electricity that's used to charge EVs is important in terms of measuring the indirect carbon footprint, the mobility sector. And so as the push for clean renewable energy in Mpumalanga grows, due to the highest grid connection capacity to uptake this renewable energy, it's also a great opportunity to pair that growth in renewable energy with EVs so that a clean, just EV transition is happening as well. So Mpumalanga has not traditionally had an automotive manufacturing industry, very similar to the predicament that the Western Cape is in currently. So automotive manufacturing has traditionally been focused on Gauteng, the Eastern Cape, and KwaZulu-Natal. And so the EV transition is also an opportunity for Mpumalanga to look at this industry with a new lens and to try to see if maybe there are innovative approaches to EV manufacturing or developing this industry that can help the Mpumalanga market get a head start at other automotive hubs. As I mentioned already, in terms of the electric retrofitting market, Mpumalanga really is punching above its weight in terms of industry influence and scale and innovation. It's happening with the case study of electric powered vehicles Africa. The Mpumalanga Green Cluster Agency will be publishing a case study soon in the coming weeks on this particular company to highlight their impact, and it's a good read for those interested in this sort of niche electrification of mobility. Yeah, so South African automotive OEMs are lagging behind in the global EV transition. There was an announcement a few weeks ago that VW will only start producing EVs in South Africa in 2035. So they are the one out of the 7 current OEMs that are manufacturing in South Africa that have made an announcement on EV manufacturing. It will be an SUV model that is specifically designed for the African market, and their strategy going forward in terms of manufacturing EVs. This is VW is not actually to export from South Africa to the European market, but rather to develop the manufacturing base here for the South African and the African regional automotive markets. So you can already see big shifts happening in terms of the way that automotive OEMs are strategizing local production of EVs, localizing of component supply chains to supply regional markets. I mentioned earlier that Europe will be banning the sale of internal combustion engine vehicles by 2035 and the US 2035 in certain states like California. EV manufacturing is seeing a return from Asia back to Europe and North America, again, with the emphasis by OEMs on local EV production, localized supply chains, and to supply regional markets instead of the global logistics that has been historical in terms of vehicles being produced in South Africa and being shipped far away to European and North American markets. I mentioned the 42% customs duty and agri goods tax. That is a barrier in terms of cost, in terms of making EVs expensive. And then, so with all of these sort of barriers and issues, how can we sustainably generate consumer demand for electric vehicles in the South African market? So I'm going to quickly go through 3 small case studies, and this in particular focuses on the opportunity in electric micro vehicles. And the reason why I'm focusing on these is that electric micro vehicles, it's very easy for startups to import knockdown kits to be able to assemble these micro vehicles locally. They are more cost effective and cheaper to assemble, to import knockdown kits and assemble, and also they don't attract the same taxes, custom duties and ad valorem taxes as the private passenger vehicle market. So which means it's very easy to to support the uptake of electric micro vehicles in South African market as a means of gaining traction. And so what we've seen in South Africa is that electric micro vehicles have been growing organically in the last mile delivery market. And this has been a purely commercial business case. There's no sort of government policy that's driving this uptake, neither are there any subsidies or tax benefits for delivery companies to use electric micro vehicles, but simply because it's a cheap, affordable, and highly functional, applicable to their market. So there's a company called Green Riders that's using electric cargo bikes that range of 100 kilometers, and they are working with Uber Eats and Mr. Delivery in South Africa to electrify and decarbonize the delivery of fast food. In South Africa, it's a really affordable economic business model for delivery drivers to use a cargo bike as opposed to an electric passenger vehicle to do this kind of work. And there's operational savings, which means the drivers can take home more income every month in terms of what they spend on deliveries. There are 600 active electric cargo bikes operated by Green Riders in South Africa. As I said, the knockdown kits are imported, battery packs are assembled locally. Yeah, a really strong business model for electrification. And then in terms of looking at a slightly more robust electric micro vehicles, so the electric moped is a step up on an electric cargo bike, also with the range of around 100 kilometers, but that can increase based on larger battery capacities. And a company called Go Electric is attempting to pilot the use of these for grocery delivery services. The pilot will expire this year, again in last mile delivery, but also later on maybe in mobility services as well. The other company is an electric three-wheeler company called Mellow Vans. This is truly an electric vehicle innovation for South Africa. These electric three-wheelers are designed and manufactured locally in South Africa using 70% local components, which is quite an incredible achievement for the local EV industry. They've been gaining a lot of traction in the last mile delivery market, but particularly the e-commerce providers or the e-commerce market that's serviced by DHL, Takealot, and Skynet. So you can see how the micromobility market is segmented within the 2 and 3 wheeler market, and really the commercial business case and vehicle fit for purpose has been what's shown the most uptake and gain in using these vehicles. And then I wanted to touch on Flex EV is a local EV startup that is bringing the first electric minibus taxi into South Africa before the end of 2022. In 2023, they're going to be doing pilot field tests for this electric minibus taxi with local minibus taxi associations to conduct field tests in terms of is the battery range and functionality of the vehicle suitable and applicable to local minibus taxi operating conditions. There's a pilot project to develop an electric minibus taxi rank hub at Stellenbosch municipality, as well as at a Century City intermodal public transport interchange in Cape Town, and those two hubs could serve as a template for electrifying public transport hubs across the country, including Mpumalanga. So there's a lot of learnings that can be shared between the two provinces there. Some statistics of around 70% of all households in South Africa use minibus taxi services. And so as part of ensuring a just EV transition in South Africa, we really need to make sure that as we transition to EVs, that it's not just something that high-income consumers have access to. Electric mobility is something that all sectors of society should be able to benefit from in terms of operational savings, health and safety savings, reduction in localized air pollution, etc. And you mentioned the market size of 350,000 vehicles in South Africa, which looks promising for Flex EV. If they can get their pilot going successfully, there'll be opportunity for local manufacturing and unpacking that value chain of electric minibus taxis in South Africa. So a practical electric vehicle manufacturing strategy for Mpumalanga, with the understanding that Mpumalanga hasn't traditionally had automotive manufacturing, but essentially it's to start with electric 2 and 3 wheelers to build capacity, skill, and a component supply chain. An example of this is Mellow Vans, an electric 3 wheeler, which has done this very, very well. Initially starting with the importing of knockdown kits and slowly localizing components used to 70%. Then clustering electric micromobility startups within a single green technologies manufacturing hub. There's been talk of a new special economic zone in Mpumalanga. We'll see where that goes in the years to come. Then remove market entry barriers and implement incentives to promote mass electric micro vehicle uptake in sectors where we are seeing large scale uptake in last mile delivery and public transport. And once we've sort of stabilized this industrial capacity and supply chains, there's opportunities that advance to electric minibus taxi manufacturing, for example, of Flex EV. It could be others as well. And then once we've sort of built the market traction with micro vehicles, minibus taxi, then it might be possible to start looking at more complex vehicles such as buses, private vans, and private passenger vehicles. Yeah, that is the end of my presentation. Arvin is going to just chat quickly about storage. Because there are a few slides on hydrogen that follows.
Yeah, thanks for that, Priyan. So some of you might have heard some discussion about hydrogen. So I'll just go through an overview of the hydrogen landscape and where it's relevant and where it's potentially not relevant. So first thing to know is there are different classifications for hydrogen depending on the source of energy used to derive that hydrogen. So terms that you might hear would be green hydrogen, which is hydrogen that is generated from renewable sources. Blue hydrogen is hydrogen from gas. Those would be probably the two main ones. Other countries, you might hear red or pink, which refers to from nuclear energy. But in South Africa, blue and green hydrogen are the two main sources. Blue hydrogen, the hydrogen is produced through steam reforming. There's already a significant amount of blue hydrogen production in South Africa, whereas for green hydrogen, it's produced through electrolysis, but there's no large-scale production of hydrogen through electrolysis in South Africa yet. Looking at where hydrogen would be used, so the main opportunities in South Africa in the hydrogen sector we see could be in your sectors that are already quite molecule dependent and hydrogen dependent. So looking at your chemicals industries, for example, looking at a company like Sasol, looking at your steel industry, so your ArcelorMittals, potentially also cement industry. So mainly your chemicals industries. Also the government in its hydrogen roadmap and strategy is looking at potentially hydrogen for long haul transport, so long distance transport. They're also looking at fuel cell vehicles. The initial overview of the efficiency and affordability and the economics of those two are still quite debatable, but again, the government is weighing it against other added benefits like potential localization and creating an industry around fuel cells. So that's why it's still part of their strategy. In other countries, we might also see it in the very long term, even in South Africa, hydrogen could be a consideration for long-term or seasonal storage on the grid. But the main thing to take away is that you're probably not going to see hydrogen in a passenger vehicle in South Africa because electric vehicles will likely beat it to the punch. But the main opportunities in hydrogen would be in your chemicals industries, and then also potentially for export to regions like Europe that have the need to decarbonize similar sectors and would like to take advantage of our ability to produce hydrogen cheaply through good renewable energy resources and land availability. Yeah, so like I mentioned, because of the main drivers for the hydrogen sector, Mpumalanga is quite a strategic province for the potential production, storage, and export for green hydrogen and hydrogen-derived fuels. So hydrogen can be put through certain processes to make it into certain products like sustainable aviation fuel or methanol, which can be potentially easier to transport or easier to incorporate in certain applications. Currently, I would say the main barriers in terms of hydrogen is the significant investment that is going to have to go into the space. Recently, in the Just Energy Transition Investment Plan, a specific section was included on hydrogen and intentions to invest in hydrogen. So there's potentially a route towards investing in hydrogen in South Africa, but we also are competing with other countries who also have quite good renewable energy resources and land, like Morocco, Namibia, and Brazil. And also to consider that a lot of our renewable energy resources might be better placed towards our own national energy security, as opposed to supplying an export market for other countries. Yep. Handing over to Yasin to look into bioenergy.
Thanks so much, Alvin, and I have to say thank you to the team because they've given a nice sort of overview of what the renewable energy space looks like. What I'm going to present on is bioenergy, and it's just to give you guys an idea of what the opportunities are and how to identify opportunities for bioenergy. Bioenergy, so what is it? It's essentially a form of renewable energy that is derived from recently living organic materials known as biomass. I have to place a disclaimer at this point. Please don't plug your light bulb into your fish tank. It's just a concept idea that you can get bioenergy or renewable energy from organic materials or recently living organic materials, and it's sort of to maximize that concept of reducing your carbon footprint and being more efficient with your resources overall. From a South African perspective, what are the solutions or the most viable solutions for bioenergy in South Africa? The first one is anaerobic digestion. You might know it as biogas production. It relies on anaerobic conditions to process organic agricultural residues, wastewater or resultant sludges into biogas, which is methane and carbon dioxide in the majority composition. And that biogas can be used for either transportation fuel or a fuel source and burners, or to generate heat and electricity. The second type of bioenergy solution is what we at Cricket refer to as thermal beneficiation, but it is essentially waste to energy technologies. And these are solutions where that process organic or waste residues, particularly contaminated non-plastic recyclables or your woody biomass, or the high calorific value and low moisture content using thermal processes. So these thermal processes may be incineration, pyrolysis, gasification, or hydrocarbonization as well. The third bioenergy solution that is applicable to South Africa is biofuel manufacturing. And this is specific processes where you take an energy crop or a feedstock to generate a fuel source. The energy crop or feedstock would be an energy crop in terms of any sort of maize or corn or wheat, which is often frowned upon being used within South Africa because of the discussion between food crops and energy crops. But there are other alternative feedstocks like your lignocellulosic residues, which is your wood-based residues like your alien invasive vegetation or your woody biomass that comes from the wood processing sector. There are other alternatives as well as refined vegetable oils and animal fats, as well as algae ponds that you can convert into alternative petroleum-based diesel or carbon chain-based fuels such as ethanol. So how do you identify if there is a bioenergy opportunity or waste energy opportunity within your municipality or business? There are three factors to consider. And although when you're developing a project, bioenergy project, you might have one particular factor driving that project, all three factors are necessary for it to be a viable bioenergy or waste energy opportunity. The first one and most critical one is that is there sufficient feedstock? And by that we mean is there enough of your either organic waste or residue that you can use to sort of build a viable project. And your bioenergy and waste to energy projects are essentially built on that availability of that feedstock. The second one, is there a product offtake or client? And essentially that means that the product that you're producing from this bioenergy opportunity, there should be a client or a off-taker that is willing to use it or buy it from your project. So that could be sort of your electricity user, your fuel user, or even if there's a byproduct, it could be sort of your nutrient-rich digestate or biochar that's produced in other cases. So from a product perspective, it needs to be able to generate enough revenue or generate enough cost saving, which a stakeholder can benefit from. And then lastly, that sort of activity of value add. Is there any value add activities? A lot of discussions and drivers of bioenergy projects sit within its potential to reduce carbon footprint of businesses and municipalities, as well as the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. It also has a high potential for increased investment into businesses and in the region, and it has a large job creation opportunity as well. What are the sort of national bioenergy market drivers? The key drivers for these projects, waste to energy and bioenergy, sit within the legislation pressure that is increasing across the board, primarily on the environmental and sustainable aspect. For example, the landfill waste bans that are coming online over the last few years and coming online in the upcoming years. An example of this is your liquid waste ban, your garden green ban that prevents you from sending your garden greens to landfill waste sites. And then in certain provinces, there are actually organic waste bans that are coming online over the next few years that are putting pressure on generators of waste to sort of have a solution for that. And as this sort of legislation pressures increase, the cost for disposing of waste will increase as well as landfill gate fees increase, and especially since landfill will be the primary disposal method of choice for a lot of businesses and municipalities still. So until an alternative solution comes online, they will not have an option but to still use those landfills. And that drives a big opportunity for bioenergy and waste to energy, because these projects not only produce products that could be energy-based, but they could produce services where you could deal with waste management and provide alternative solutions to landfill. My colleagues have touched on significantly early in terms of the electricity price increases, as well as the need for energy security. I was quite happy to hear in the first exercise that the discussion between McCain, for example, trying to achieve energy security versus that sort of revenue-based model of the municipality losing out the revenue if McCain goes off of the grid. But these are also drivers of bioenergy projects because they provide opportunities to address those issues as well. And then the last one, which is a common one on a global discussion that South Africa is getting pressure on, is also to lower its carbon footprint, particularly finding an alternative for fossil fuels usages or production. And we know South Africa, so electricity generation is primarily dominated by coal at the moment. So therefore, it's quite important to diversify what that renewable energy options are. Solar PV and wind would dominate the utility scale, but bioenergy does have a small opportunity to assist on a more private, small-scale embedded generation scale. It's important to also highlight that one of the biggest barriers to bioenergy projects is the long time it takes to develop a project, which is why I felt it's critical to sort of touch on the project development process for bioenergy projects. In terms of the project, how you would develop a project, you'd follow your typical project development process, which is you'd have a scoping phase, a pre-feasibility phase, a feasibility stage, and then you'll have financial closure, and you'll execute in terms of primary project implementation, and then from a finance perspective, you'll have your secondary financing investment. For bioenergy projects, theoretically, you should be able to complete your scoping and pre-feasibility stages within the first 1 to 3 months. However, because bioenergy and waste energy projects or the market is quite nascent to South Africa, the experience in terms of establishing successful projects is limited. This will often take about double the time that is stated on the slide. In terms of assessing your feasibility, we estimate it should be completed in 6 to 12 months in traditional project developments timelines on a global scale. However, in South Africa, because there's a lot of legislation, licensing and permitting that need to go around this before you can reach that bankability stage, often your feasibility studies go on much longer to 2 and 3 times the sort of traditional standard timelines, and you end up having to develop a project for 2 to 3 years before you can reach financial close, just to make sure that the risk for implementing these projects have been reduced. So what are the project considerations that are needed? And essentially, you can break it down into 3 or 4 components. The first one we've touched on quite a bit already is the feedstock. The second one is the process and project or technology selection. The third one is the products produced and how you're going to sort of valorize those product usage. And the fourth one, which is going to be critical as well, is the byproducts produced. Looking at your feedstock considerations for all 3 solutions that I mentioned in earlier slides, you need to have a guarantee of feedstock coming in. From a biomass perspective, this could be your wood waste, invasive alien vegetation, organic waste extracted from municipal solid waste, or organic waste extracted from agricultural and agri-processing residues. It could also include, which is not on the slide, your sort of wastewater treatment sewage sludge, because your bioenergy technologies can treat that as well. We see that at our traditional large-scale wastewater treatment works, where you have an anaerobic digester installed as a pre-treatment mechanism, and that does produce biogas, which you could extract as well. However, there are other non-organic or living organic materials that can be used within these sort of technologies, particularly on the thermal beneficiation side, and those are your plastics, particularly your non-recyclable soil. And there's an emphasis on that because South Africa is one of the leading recycling markets in the world, particularly of plastics. It recycles about 40% of its plastics that are extracted from its municipal solid waste streams. That's not to say that there aren't plastics still going to landfill. And there are certain plastics that are soiled or that are considered non-recyclable or can be recycled but does not have an offtake market, which could use an additional solution to prevent it from going to landfill. So it's those plastics that we're emphasizing on. And then your general waste that still goes to landfill, that where you've extracted all your valuable resources like your recyclable plastics, your organic waste, etc. If that general waste still has a high calorific value, you could potentially produce a refuse-derived fuel that could be used in this thermal beneficiation technologies. What's critical to know in terms of developing a project in bioenergy, waste to energy for feedstock perspective is that you are governed by the National Environmental Management Waste Act, and these lists all have thresholds and determinants that require you to either do a full environmental impact assessment, or if it falls within the norms and standards of organic waste treatment or any other norms and standards, you might need to just register and get a permit for it. However, it's critical to highlight that these processes do take time, which often discourage these projects from proceeding ahead because of the tedious process that's required to get these licensing and permits over the line. Then from a process and project consideration, the relevant process selection is critical. Projects have failed in the country based on the improper technology being selected or not sufficient expertise in being in the country to operate and maintain those projects. What's critical here is that, particularly with the thermal beneficiation technology, is the Air Quality Act, which means you'll need to get an emissions license. How does that project, how will it impact on the biodiversity of the location you select? And then there's also Protected Areas Act that needs to be considered as well on where you establish your site. What's key to note here from a process and project consideration on a municipal level, there are a lot of sort of bylaws and authorizations that are required. These are your traditional sort of engineering and design bylaws and authorizations that may be applicable to solar PV, wind, but a little bit extra for bioenergy projects as well. But it's important to know that will be required when you reach the project implementation stage, and you need to assess what or how many of those permits are needed within your feasibility stage. And it might be requested that you've gotten or obtained those permits already for your project to be invested in as well. From a product consideration perspective, you need to sort of identify within your business model what you're going to use the product for. Traditionally, over the last 15 years, the product consideration was electricity generation. However, as you would have seen in my previous colleague's presentation, for a bioenergy or waste energy for a project to compete on a cost basis versus solar PV and wind is very difficult on utility scale or even on a small scale in the generation size. So it requires a very unique sort of circular on-site model where you're getting your feedstock from a particular farm or a business, and they are using that electricity generated on-site to reduce their energy demand. So that's a very unique business model, but the bigger opportunity sits within fine chemicals and alternative fuels, where you're generating fuel products that can replace fossil fuel-based fuels or fossil-based fuel sources. And that is sort of where the driver for bioenergy sits, because you get an additional benefit of reducing carbon footprint and emissions, as well as sort of providing a little bit of energy security for yourself as well, due to sort of the fossil fuel energy crisis on a global scale as well. Then usages that you could use for this product, you can, as I mentioned, ideally you can use it on site when you're getting your feedstock. That would be the most ideal situation. But there's been mentioned, my colleague Monchaka mentioned the opportunity of wheeling, but that concept of wheeling doesn't just sit within the generation aspect for bioenergy. It could be potential of where you are bottling these gases or chemicals or fuel, and you can sell it to a third party, and that provides an opportunity as well. What needs to be highlighted, particularly with own usages, that if you, and it's highly unlikely that your project will be over 100 megawatt, but with the new legislation adjustment, you just need to notify NERSA that you are establishing this project and you wouldn't need a generation license provided you're under 100 megawatts. The ideal size of a bioenergy project's maximum would probably be 5 megawatts, but the average size of implement will probably be 500 kilowatts installation. But here again, from a third party feeding off, you need to know all the legislation around wheeling and sort of shifting that energy products or products produced from that site to your client or customer base. In terms of byproduct consideration, this is a very critical one to the project. It's often overlooked. A perfect example would be biogas. Within South Africa at the moment, the digestate produced from a biogas plant is often difficult to handle. If you have a management plan, it can be detrimental to the project. So therefore, you need to know whether you have to dispose of any byproducts, whether you can reuse it, or whether you can generate an additional revenue option. It's important because it's often overlooked and people realize only once they've implemented the project that they don't have a solution for it. And what can happen then is that it becomes a cost to the project. You need to make sure that the solution pathway you choose for that byproduct also doesn't have a legislative barrier that can prevent you from doing what you'd like to do with that product. For example, again, digestate on a global scale, it's ideal for soil remediation to use it as a soil enhancing product, whether it be a fertilizer or compost. But in South Africa, you need to register the product according to a legislation, and it becomes difficult to sort of trade that digestate. And often a better option would be to sort of just give it away to a farmer that's willing to take it for free. So that sort of wraps up the sort of bioenergy concept and what I wanted to cover in this learning series. but I wanted to have a little bit of an interactive session with the audience because I know bioenergy is often perceived as a complex sort of option for renewable energy or for any alternative beneficiation process. So I'm going to post the question to the group, and I'll say I'll give it 1 minute for people to ask the question. You know, give an example of a simpler solution of a biogas process, example of a biofuel manufacturing process, and one on the thermal beneficiation process. So is there anyone that's willing to take a guess of a simple example of a biogas process? Any ideas? There is no wrong answer.
Does anyone want to take a chance? Where's some of our Jacob?
People are a bit shy. I'm not going to hang too much on this because I just thought it was be an interesting exercise to show you how simple it can be, but to be aware that when you scale up, it does become a little bit more complicated. So the simplest example of a biogas process would be your stomach. You eat food, your stomach digests it and goes in your colon, you produce biogas and it digests it. That's the easiest one. It's really simple, you know. So that's that you're taking that process and you're moving it to industrial scale basically, and your feedstock would be your organic residues, you produce your biogas and you digest it as well. The second one, a biofuel manufacturing process. Anyone want to take a guess on what a simple process for biofuel manufacturing would look like? And I'm pretty sure in Mpumalanga, this is happening quite on a large scale. Okay, so we have no takers, fine. The simplest biofuel manufacturing process will probably be your brewing of beer. If there's anyone that brews beer locally within on the farm or at their house in the garage, that's another example because essentially you're taking a feedstock and you're producing an alcohol or a carbon chain-based fuel that has an energy potential to it. So that's your simplest biofuel manufacturing process. Does anyone want to take a guess on a simple thermal beneficiation process, perhaps? And this I know South Africans do on a weekly basis. So, does anyone want to take a guess? No? Okay, the easiest one would be your brine on the weekend. Essentially, you're taking your coal, you're putting it, and you're starting a fire, and you're getting heat of there, and you're putting another product in that process, your meat, to get another beneficiated product. So that's another simple example. But from an industry perspective, you're basically scaling up these ideas, and you're looking at a more business viable option, and you're looking also for those carbon footprint reduction benefits, as well as greenhouse gas emission benefits. I'm going to hand back to my colleagues to take us through the final exercise of the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Yasin, for that insightful presentation of bioenergy. I'm sure the audience and everyone else learned a lot from that. Next, we will be moving over to exercise 2, which will be led by Machaka and possibly assistance from the team as well. It's the same process as we done it the first time. Tula will write the comments or add your comments on the sticky notes, and then you will be able to see it. So over to you, Machaka.
Right, thank you so much, Sam. So as Sam has rightly indicated, we are going to be using the same format as the previous exercise. So we've had a few amazing presentations that give this broad spectrum of opportunities within the renewable economy space. So the first question is from the information that you've gathered today, from all the lessons learned today, from the interactions that we've had, what is your role within the green economy, and do you understand your role? So just to provide additional context, this time around we're not necessarily focused on the municipal role. It's just understanding, having an interactive session to have the perspectives from the different industry leaders as well.
So maybe we should ask a few people what they think. This-
Check. Check. Oh, sorry.
Good.
Jacob, would you like to have a go at the question?
Well, I think our role in this growing green economy, it's simple because we have to make sure that the public understand what is it that we're doing, especially from our perspective. I was just talking to my fellow colleague now. They were trying to collect the revenue from a particular customer. Now, when they arrive there, they find out that the customer has installed his own solar panels. So he says, you can take your municipal infrastructure or electrical wires. I've got my own generation. So you can do whatever. So they could not penalize that particular person. So I think, yes, there are opportunities for municipalities and for household, as the latter speaker has said, that it's not only municipalities, but also for household, it's beneficiary. But we need to have more public participation on the issue so that everybody can understand clearly what is it all about. But for the elite, people who can afford these solar panels and the other generations of power, it's an advantage for them. But for the poor of the poorest, it's a disadvantage because they have to wait for the government to subsidize them or to help them in achieving that. Thank you.
Right, thank you so much, Jacob, for that insight. Do we have another brave taker to answer the question or to provide more insights? I'll take on another familiar name. Molly, do you have any insights to share regarding this question? Molly.
It's the first time we see it. Okay.
Last Kate.
Audrey, you've been a bit quiet during this time. Would you like to take a chance at answering the question, or do you have any other contributions that you can add to it?
Yes, Colette.
Oh, Colette, you can go ahead.
Our role would be is the Economic Development Agency of the province to, while on my side is investment promotion and facilitation, to actually promote Mpumalanga is an investment. It's a province where we can attract investment in these areas, in the green economy space, whether we're finding investors who can come and set up for the electric vehicles or anything related to this green economy space. So I see our role as that, promoting the province, especially now that we're going to be going through the just transition. Attracting these investors and facilitating those investments within the province.
All right, thank you so much for that, Colette. So we are about to move on to the next question, but before we do we have any last minute takers?
No, I think that was just
all right, okay. Yes, now moving on to the next question. What are the active drivers that support your participation within the renewable energy space?
I see Colette is unmuted. Colette, you can go for it. Oh, she's muted. Who hasn't participated yet?
Mandla.
Where? Mandla! You've been quiet there for a while. Would you like to take a chance on answering the question?
So we're not getting a response from Mandla. William, how are you feeling in answering the question? All right. Okay, so since we don't have any active takers for the second question, we'll move on to the last one. To encourage the increased participation within the green economy space in Mpumalanga, what type of support would you need? Any responses? Any takers? So I'll pick oh yes.
There's a hand. Jacob, you can go for it.
Opportunity again. Now, I think from our perspective, in order for us to increase the participation in this renewable energy, we will need more workshops with the staff here so that we are able to be in one page and speak one language in terms of renewable energies. Because of late, you can see that there are movements which are being done to stop this thing of just transition due to the fact that as Nkangala region, we are the most coal producers and most mines are here in Nkangala, especially your Malahleni, Victor Kanye, and the others. But now for the public to be able to own up to this thing and see it as a beneficiary, I think we'll need more workshops together with the staff and the community at large. But the other assistance which you have in terms of funding for the municipality if it wants to move from the grid in terms of solar panels, your wastewater treatment plant, solars to power our plants and our boreholes. I think we will need that also, just to have more clarity on that. But I think, yes, if we can have more information so that we can be able to share with the colleagues at work and the community at large. I thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Jacob. Do we have anyone else that would like to share their insights? Okay, so I'll pick another random name. Lebohang, do you have anything to share?
No, I actually agree with Jacob on what he has just pointed out now, that I think there needs to be more workshop and more sharing of knowledge and more understanding of what needs to go into these processes in order for the municipality to be able to transition from the traditional electricity into this new renewable energy era. So I think, yeah, that's the basis of the support that we need. We first need to have more understanding of the processes and procedures, so we can be able to furthermore implement them within our municipalities.
Right, thank you for that, Leroy. So we've had two insights from Jacob and Leroy agreeing with Jacob. Do we have any other sector representatives, industry leaders, or that have additional insights to share in terms of the support that you need for increased participation?
Philip has a hand up.
From our side, I think for us to actually coordinate ourselves as the provincial agency with the municipalities, because we need to work together so that we know exactly what is happening in the different municipalities. So the support in that instance where we can actually coordinate ourselves so that we functioning as a province and not as an agency and municipalities separately.
Right. Thank you so much for that, Colette. So before we round up the exercise, do we have any additional takers?
Yeah, I think it would be interesting to hear. So you've been with us for a significant amount of time on the session. For those who maybe haven't contributed yet, maybe a takeaway, one takeaway from the session from what you've heard.
Timothy has his hand up. Timothy, you can go ahead.
Thank you very much. I'm Timothy Wati from Renewable Energy. Am I laudable enough?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so I mean, the very first slide that was presented, earlier today, which indicated, barriers, for Mpumalanga around, access to information. I would like actually to agree with, Colette, where she mentioned just now to say there should be a better coordination between province and municipalities, because as an independent power producer ourselves, we've engaged a couple of municipalities, and one of the feedback that we received is the fact that there is what they call a district municipality procurement program, where when they want to procure power, it needs to be done at a district level. But some municipalities, they say something different. And so we've knocked on those doors to say we're available. We think we can, play a major role in, just energy transition. But I think maybe there's a lack of information, so better coordination between, provincial and municipality or district level can help in terms of dissemination of information to independent power producers such as ourselves. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Great. Thank you so much, Timothy. That's some really great insights. Do we have any additional hand?
Jacob? You can go
Thank
ahead.
you again. Yes. Now, my question, or just a clarity seeking one, is to say, as I was in this workshop, a message popped from my WhatsApp. Another a group, which is our local group here, they are showing something from Germany that says Germany is dismantling all its hydropower stations, going back to coal. Now, the sustainability of this renewable energy, how sustainable it is, so that as soon as we move from coal-powered electricity to wind, solar, and biochemicals, how sustainable are they? Because there's this skepticism to say in Germany they did this and it's failing there. Now it's being fed to us as South Africans. There's that politics around that thing. So I'm not sure how do we go past that, because it's now the topic of the day, especially after the closing of Komati Power Station, which is here in Mpumalanga. Now that has caused a stir, and I see a lot of community groups are starting to get into this matter. But their argument point will be to say this thing is not sustainable enough. They are bringing it here, but over the years we must dismantle it again. So can I have clarity just on there? Thank you.
Yeah, I think what you're referring to is it's not that Germany is moving away from renewable energy. They are going more into renewable energy. The coal power plants issue is more related with the reliance on gas from Russia, and because of the conflict now in Ukraine, they have found themselves in a position where suddenly they don't have access to gas anymore, and they were very much reliant on the gas from Russia. So when it's suddenly cut off, they themselves have an energy crisis, like we have an energy crisis. And the way they are dealing with it is to, in the short run, just to switch on some new coal power plants, just for the short term, so they can get more renewable energy on board, get more deals with the neighboring countries in the European Union to get access to other kinds of energy. And a lot of this, what they're talking about, is also trying to speak to countries like South Africa to get more, to look at hydrogen as a source of energy. So the whole going back to coal thing, it's more related with what's happening with regards to the conflict, and it's also a short-term move. It's not a long-term move. It's just a short-term move because they have coal power plants ready to switch those on until they can get a different source of energy. But they are still going full steam ahead with renewable energy, and they're still building new big power plants for renewable energy as part of that move. So it's not a matter
No,
of...
I think, yeah, I think you gave me good clarity on that one. But if we can have such a news so that we counteract the ones which are saying they are moving away from the renewable energy. You see, from the public perspective, it seems as if this thing is failing overseas, but it's being brought here. But now, if we can be able to share such information so that when they give you these news, you are able to counteract them. But thank you for your clarity. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for everyone who participated in the yes, we have another question.
We have another hand. Lebukhang, the floor is yours.
Yes, I'd like to ask a question that's not related to the exercise. I just wanted to find out when this Majaka was presenting from the generator to the customer, like I wanted to find out, is this new supply line going to have a new network, or let's say for an example, can the wind power energy and the what do you call it, the solar power, can it tap into the existing network, or a new network would have to be constructed?
Okay, so the second part is actually the correct part. The wheeling, the generator would be feeding into an already existing distribution network. So you wouldn't need to have any new infrastructure or transmission infrastructure that would need to be built for that generator to wheel to the customer. So the understanding is that you have this customer that is located within the municipal network, the municipal distribution network. And so this customer has an agreement with a generator that's located in a different location. So all this generator does is wheel this power over that existing network so that they can feed the customer that they have.
Oh, okay, no, I'm covered there.
Just a comment on the previous question, just to clarify, Germany's goal for phasing out coal-fired power generation is by 2038, and that has not changed. So I have a supporting article. I'm sure Samantha will be able to share that.
Yeah, I will be. Just send me the link, and then I can send it to the participants as well. So if nobody has any questions, then I think it's a wrap. It's the end of our session together. I just want to say thank you to all the participants who have joined and participated in the workshop today. We really appreciate your time and efforts. And then I would also like to thank the energy team for all their hard work and preparation for today. We really appreciate it, and I'm sure the audience enjoyed it, and most importantly, they've learned from the session today as well. Thank you very much, and I will definitely keep in touch. I'll send you the article that Priyan has mentioned now, and then I would also send the presentation that the team has presented today, and the survey, a short survey that you will just have to answer after the workshop. But thank you for your time. Bye, everyone.